In 2016, the US electorate will go to the voting booths and choose between what will likely be Hillary Clinton and a yet unknown GOP presidential candidate. After 8 years of rule under Barack Obama, a man who seems to enjoy playing golf a little bit too much, and as well as telling conservatives and Christians how to live their lives, the GOP has an amazing opportunity to take back the White House and push Hillary Clinton out. The thing is, though, I'm beginning to think that this won't actually happen. The more and the more I see of the GOP candidates, the more I think that voters may well actually turn to the flip-flopping and the useless Hillary Clinton because A, she's a woman, and that's some kind of big progressive deal like Barack Obama being the first black president, and B, the GOP candidate is even more useless. I regularly say that America can learn a lot from Britain's mistakes, and it's not just when it comes to Islamization. Americans can learn from the failed tactics of British political parties, even in recent elections. The United Kingdom Independence Party fielded more candidates than they had ever done before in 2015, this year, blowing millions on a thoroughly professional and great campaign. But despite this, and despite winning the 2014 European elections the year before, UKIP lost one of its 2 MPs in the general election. I believe that UKIP's problem was not just the first past the post system working against them, but because, in fact, they attempted to attract the wrong voters. Nigel Farage constantly tried to convince the media that he wasn't racist. He was constantly defending himself, and even had some kind of ridiculous stunt where he embraced people of a huge range of different backgrounds on stage, gathering them all together, and it was the most elaborate declaration of some of my best friends are black that I've ever seen in my life. Nigel Farage begged for the vote from the multiculturalists, and that's pointless because the multiculturalists would never, ever vote for him. And then, in doing this, he ignored the white working class folk who were affected by multiculturalism and affected by mass immigration. He ignored a significant proportion of the 33% of British people who didn't vote. That's 15 million people. And then there's Ed Miliband, who led the Labour Party to a disastrous defeat. So he gave the Conservative Party a workable majority and he allowed them to form a government, unfortunately for us. There are lots more moving parts, but ultimately it seemed to me that Ed Miliband wasn't clear enough about what he actually wanted to do, despite writing it in this massive stone thing that was completely embarrassing. He offered no radical change at all, and he simply didn't inspire anyone. That, and he's a bumbling freak. I'm seeing the same things happening with the Republican Party today. Now, the only reason that the erratic and egotistical Donald Trump is doing so well in the polls right now is because he's got clear goals. He says he wants to make America rich, and he says he wants to stop illegal immigration. Great stuff. But would I trust him to be president? Probably not, but that's neither here nor there. Trump's rise to the top of the polls at the moment, 31st of July, I might add, has been greeted by countless Republicans screaming bloody murder and despairing at how many voters in the GOP and beyond seem to be attracted to him. But really, it's not Trump that's the problem. The problem is that the so-called serious candidates are not inspiring, like Ed Miliband, or they're trying to attract the wrong voters, like Nigel Farage. So let's take Jeb Bush, for instance, the so-called conservative, who claimed that Donald Trump's comments about immigration actually hurt him. Give me a break, this man is trying to run for presidency as a conservative candidate. In order to actually conserve a culture, to preserve a civilization, a people and a values, borders are necessary. What conservative Jeb Bush doesn't get, well, he doesn't get it at all. And by pandering to the vote of the bleeding heart liberals, he's just going to fail. But even if it works, it just means that a Democrat in disguise will take the White House. I was pleased to see, however, that Rand Paul, the libertarian-ish candidate, openly said that he'd like to stop immigration from Muslim countries. But coming from a man who just a couple of years ago supported a path to citizenship for illegals, I'd probably take that with a big pinch of salt. A great policy though it is, stopping immigration and stopping Muslim immigration is only one piece in a huge jigsaw puzzle that depicts the destruction of a civilization. Immigration from Mexico needs to stop. The Marxist-controlled institutions must be smashed, and the creeping Sharia that's already within the US needs to be stopped now. When I was at CPAC 2015, I saw candidate after candidate talk about the threat of ISIS, Rand Paul included. This is another serious problem with all candidates in the Republican Party. Not one of these Republican candidates is talking about the threat from within. Perhaps this is because they don't realise it's happening yet, or perhaps they just think the actual threat of ISIS is bigger, but they only really need to look over the pond and see how Islamic grooming gangs are raping and killing thousands of innocent white and Sikh girls. They need to look at how Sharia courts have created a parallel system of justice, how more than half of Muslim men and women are on benefits in the UK, and how Britain is creating and exporting terrorists who are terrorising the whole world, and they're coming from us. These problems will come to the United States, make no mistake, and it's time that the GOP voters, the activists, and the leaders all started talking about the issues that are actually going to affect the country in the coming years. Combine this with a forward-looking position, and combine that with the straight-talking attitude of Donald Trump, and dedication to the voters who will actually support you and not the ones who won't vote for you, and you've got a winning candidate on your hands. In short, my message is that the Republican candidates need to pull their socks up. That is, if they're going to beat Donald Trump. It's no use whining about it. Offer a vision of hope for your people, not for the multiculturalists and the Democrats. And you'll win. You will win. Discuss the serious threat of multiculturalism in Islam, and on top of that, you'll lay the foundations for a thriving, peaceful nation in the future. My message is to learn from Britain's mistakes, and for God's sake, stop pandering to Marxists.
The build-up to Tuesday's Michigan primary has seen a barrage of attack ads being launched between Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum. In an appearance in Michigan yesterday, Santorum accused Romney and Ron Paul of forming an alliance and colluding against him. It is a question I asked Paul campaign senior advisor Doug Weed when he joined us on the show over a month ago. Here's an exchange we're going to play between Ron Paul and Mitt Romney.
If we want people who spent their life and their career, most of their career in Washington, we have three people on the stage who, well, I take that back. We got a doctor down here who spent most of his time in the surgical suite. Well, not surgery, the birthing suite.
A lot of people interpreted that from Romney as being extremely deferential to Ron Paul. What should we make of that? Do you think he may be angling for Ron Paul's supporters eventually?
I think that all of the candidates ought to. There's no path to the White House without Ron Paul.
And now Doug is back. So, Doug, I ask you once again with a welcome, is there an alliance brewing here?
Brewing. Well, there is no alliance. I mean, Ron Paul and Mitt Romney are exact opposites. Maybe that's why they like each other so much. Mitt Romney is the biggest flip-flopper in modern political history. Ron Paul is the most consistent. Ann Romney drives two Cadillacs. I don't know how she does that. Carol Paul drives a Chevy.
Yeah.
Now, Carol Paul would like to drive a Cadillac. And if we can reform the monetary policy the way Ron Paul wants and not be bailing out rich people, but let all of us have a chance, maybe we'll all get to drive Cadillacs, but there is no deal.
Here's one thing that was speculated with a political analyst earlier on the broadcast, saying that Ron Paul's aiming for number 2 here. He's just trying to get rid of Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich.
No, listen, Rick Santorum is actually leading in your poll that you just showed today. So what are we supposed to do? I mean, we have a flip-flopper on one hand, we have a fake conservative on the other. And Ron Paul looks at this. Rick Santorum raised the national debt 5 times, voted for that. Ron Paul didn't. He goes around acting like he's a social conservative, but he votes for millions of dollars for Planned Parenthood. Ron Paul didn't do that. So you've got Santorum saying in the national debate, I voted for No Child Left Behind, but I didn't believe it was the right thing. I did it for the team. Well, his first loyalty is to the team. Ron Paul's first loyalty is to the U.S. Constitution. As Bob Dylan says, you got to serve somebody. So we don't like either one of them. We like Ron Paul.
Yeah, now you make a point about Rick Santorum leading in the national polls, Doug, and indeed he does. I believe it's 31 to 30% right now. But the point is that a month ago or so, he was up by like 10 points. So there's certainly a trend there. Whom do you think is the toughest for Ron Paul to beat among his colleagues, shall we say, in the GOP campaign?
We're in almost like a different campaign because we're in an educational as well as political campaign. You have to understand that it's not which candidate is tougher, it's how quickly can we get our message out to the people in time. Because once the lights go on, once they understand what's at stake, our people stick with us. When Ron Paul came to Congress, everybody was taking money from the lobbyists. It wasn't like some were and some weren't. All of them were. And Ron Paul was like this Gandhi-like creature who wouldn't take bribes, who wouldn't take money from the lobbyists, who wouldn't go on a junket because he knew it was a taxpayer-paid vacation, who wouldn't go into little rooms, pick stocks, and then decide the policy that would dictate whether those stocks go up or down. He was pure. So now he's in a presidential run, and he's trying to reform the whole system. It's not an easy task, but we're pleased with what's happening.
But Doug, I mean, Ron Paul essentially is not campaigning in the state of Michigan, which holds its primary on Tuesday. He is running an attack ad against Rick Santorum. So my question to you is, why Rick Santorum? Why not Mitt Romney?
Well, you know, if you follow the money, and you'll see our ads, most of our money was spent on the Three of the Kind ad. We had to get a Rick Santorum ad out. He was #1. And we are running in Michigan in certain districts, and we want our people in Michigan to, they know what we're doing. We want them to work hard. But we're in for a marathon run. This isn't going to be over very quickly, very easy. And I can tell you this, if Ron Paul got the ring of power, he'd throw it in Mount Doom. It's not about glory and power for him. It's about reforming this government and bringing it back to the Constitution and opening the free marketplace again for everybody.
Does Ron Paul want primetime speaking to have his policies considered at the convention in Tampa?
Listen, if 22 years of lobbyist money and women and appeals to his ego and let's play the game and buy stocks and then write the rules to determine whether those stocks go up, if he couldn't be corrupted by 22 years of what he's been through in Washington, then there's no promise from Mitt Romney of a speech or anything else that will make him roll over on the principles he believes.
All right, Doug Weed, always good to talk with you. Thanks for joining us.